This is the CBS News Special Report. I'm Gail King with Bianna Goladriga here in New York. The Senate Judiciary Committee is meeting on Capitol Hill right now, ready to vote on sending Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court nomination to the full Senate. The 21 senators, as you see, are filing in. They're meeting just 14 hours after the end of a day-long public hearing where they heard very powerful testimony from Judge Kavanaugh and the woman who says he sexually assaulted her in high school.
The Republicans who control the Judiciary panel are moving on a tight schedule set down by Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. He wants the full Senate to take a final vote on Kavanaugh as early as Tuesday. We don't know how that vote will go because a few senators are still officially undecided.
Nancy Cordes is on Capitol Hill, ready to show us how this committee meeting will unfold today. Nancy, good morning. What can we expect?
Well, we just got a big hint a couple of minutes ago about what we can expect, Gail and Bianna, and that is because Jeff Flake, Republican from Arizona, who was undecided and clearly still agonizing as of last night, has just announced that he will vote to confirm Judge Kavanaugh. He is on the committee. He is one of the 11 Republicans on the committee, and here's what he had to say. What I do know is that our system of justice affords a presumption of innocence to the accused, and this is what binds us to the rule of law. While some may argue that a different standard should apply, I believe that the Constitution's provisions of fairness and due process apply here as well. So basically what he is saying is that he heard what Christine Blasey Ford had to say. Publicly, he said that he found her very compelling, but clearly he does not believe that there is enough evidence to conclude, at least in his mind, that Judge Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her some 36 years ago, and he is going to vote to confirmed. So absent some major surprise from one of the other 10 Republicans on this committee, it looks as if they are all going to vote yes. We know all the Republicans will vote no. That is an 11-10 vote. And then this proceeds to the full Senate, where there still is an open question about whether some other undecided Republicans, like Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, will vote yes.
So that would be a big bombshell, Nancy. He had been on the fence, Senator Flake. We want to get to Ed O'Keefe now. White House spokesman said this morning that they're confident there will be enough votes in the full Senate to confirm Kavanaugh's nomination, and Ed is outside of that hearing room where the committee is meeting. Ed, this is big news coming from Senator Flake.
Something that happened overnight after all of the cameras were off.
Bianna, yes, a little tricky to hear you, but what you're asking me there, I believe, is about Jeff Flake of Arizona. That essentially puts the icing on the cake, at least at the committee level, for Kavanaugh. 11 Republicans, 10 Democrats. It'll make it easier for this to sail through to the Senate. So what happens next? Well, we believe the Majority Leader Mitch McConnell will begin the procedural process tomorrow morning in a rare weekend vote that would essentially put the vote on the calendar. It would have to sort of, in a sense, marinate for the next 3 days before a vote could be held either really late in the night Monday or on Tuesday morning. That's one day after the Supreme Court actually begins its next session, which means that Republicans will have essentially kept their pledge to put him on the court. They were just late by one day. And that is assuming that all Republicans actually vote for the nomination. Several of them are still outstanding. Gail?
Thank you very much, Ed. Let's go back to Nancy, because this news about Jeff Flake is really an important development in the story. Because, Nancy, all day yesterday we kept getting reports that he looked pain, that he said he had to go home and sleep on it over the night, that he had a lot to think about. Are you surprised that this is his decision today?
You know, I think I would have been surprised either way, Gail, because he has been so agonized. You know, he came out and spoke to us last night and said, you really can't walk out of that hearing and know who is telling the truth. 1 minute you think Christine Blasey Ford is right. 1 minute you think that Brett Kavanaugh is right. And he's one of the few Republicans who came out early on and said, I will not vote for Brett Kavanaugh unless we have a chance to hear from this accuser, Christine Blasey Ford. Most Republicans didn't want to have to hold this hearing. They thought it would slow things down and put his nomination in greater jeopardy. However, it's because of Flake and a handful of other Republicans that we saw this riveting testimony all day yesterday. Clearly, though, he doesn't believe that it's enough to change his position on Kavanaugh.
Yeah, Senator Flake insisted upon hearing from Dr. Ford. And I want to turn to Jan Crawford, our chief legal correspondent, who's also in Washington. She's covered most of the controversies involving the Supreme Court over the last 25 years. Can't think of a controversy more serious than this, though, over the last couple of decades, Nancy. And I'm sorry, Jan, and I want to ask you what role you think, if any, Senator Graham played yesterday in this decision by Jeff Flake, really pleading with his party members to, in his opinion, do the right thing and go forward with the vote for Kavanaugh.
Well, I think that was pivotal. When Senator Graham kind of unleashed on the Democrats, he framed this vote and this controversy as Democrats being obstructionist and smearing what he said was an innocent man. It turned the entire focus off of the testimony of Ford that morning all the way back onto the Democrats and made them the issue. And then with that emotional appeal, of course, directly to Jeff Flake. I mean, obviously, Senator Graham had been a long-time friend of the late Senator McCain. But I thought in Senator Flake's comments yesterday, his very brief comments, that it suggested that he was inclined to vote for this nomination when he said that, you know, there will be doubt. I mean, he acknowledged that in his comments during the hearing yesterday. And then, as you saw from what Nancy has read, that he said this morning that he had concluded that when there is doubt, though, the burden is not on the accused. And so I think you're going to hear a lot of that this morning if he does further explain his decision. But Senator Graham, to your point, that was pivotal, not only for Flake, but I saw also throughout the entire hearing, and as we go forward, just in terms of framing that. And it also, finally, I think, united Republicans across the spectrum. So in a strange way now, you've had Democrats very united behind Ford, but now you've got Republicans, never Trumpers, the ones who would not vote for Trump. They would have voted for Hillary before Trump. Those Republicans, those establishment Republicans now are behind Kavanaugh. So you see the party, the Republican Party, also united in the way that the Democratic Party is. And so the divisiveness now going forward, that's what we're going to be seeing,
you know, Jan,
on this nomination.
Jan, it was emotional testimony from both sides, certainly from the doctor and certainly from Judge Kavanaugh. But I think many people were talking about Dr. Ford's testimony in particular. What does this say, if anything, about what Republicans thought about her testimony yesterday?
You know, I thought what was interesting is how they kind of went out of their way to not really question you know, her or attack her. That was so different than what we saw in 1991 and how the handling and the questioning of Anita Hill was handling. So, you know, they were walking this line to try to suggest, and as you saw later, that maybe she had misremembered this, but also express sympathy for her and repeat over. We saw from the White House, we saw from Kellyanne Conway that she needed to be heard. And then going forward to say what you're seeing now, that there still was not corroboration because no one had been told about this for 30 years, and then quickly shift the focus back to the Democrats and how they had handled it and not released this for the last 2 months. So, you know, they were trying to kind of do, I thought, several different things yesterday as they really responded to some of this.
And let's bring Nancy back in because, Nancy, two other key votes and two unknowns, Senator Murkowski and Senator Collins. How much pressure is on them now to follow suit with Senator Flake?
There's an incredible amount of pressure. In fact, that there was a theory. They met with Flake last night and an undecided Democrat, Joe Manchin of West Virginia. And there's a theory that has been floating around that they were all going to vote together, that either they would all vote yes or all vote no, so they could provide each other with some political cover. Now, they all have different political calculations. Some of them are up for re-election. Some aren't. Some come from redder states than others. You know, they're all facing a lot of heat from both their own party and the other side, no matter what they do. But certainly, you know, the focus on Murkowski and Collins has been laser-like since the very beginning. But fascinatingly, there's also growing pressure this morning on those 3 Democrats from red states who voted for Neil Gorsuch and could vote for Kavanaugh. Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota, and Joe Donnelly of Indiana. And let's listen in now to Chuck Grassley. He's the chair of the Judiciary Committee, and it sounds like he's beginning to get things underway.
I have some peace and quiet. I'd like to start out today where we left off on September the 13th, although this is a new meeting. But I was anticipating a lot of motions from the minority, and we did have some motions for the minority. But if you remember, I said that I'll give the minority a chance to make their motions, and then I was going to make a motion that we have a time certain to vote. And so I want to make that motion time certain to vote. But if there is a motion from a minority, I would recognize that motion first.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to subpoena Mark Judge as a witness before our committee.
Okay. Let me hold.
And I'd be happy to speak to it, but I wanted
hold just a minute. Could you make your remarks short, please, and speak now, and then we will vote? Proceed.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. We heard yesterday from an extraordinarily courageous, strong survivor, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. Every one of us, I think, were riveted and powerfully impressed by her truth. We heard her provide details in that story that can be corroborated and other facts that can be uncovered if we hear from other witnesses who have very relevant, important knowledge about what happened to her on that evening in that room. The third person allegedly in the room was Mark Judge. Evidently, he has never been interviewed by the FBI. He has never been questioned by any member of our committee. He has never submitted a detailed account of what he knows. And so I move, Mr. Chairman, that we have him before this committee as a witness. He could be interviewed beforehand on a bipartisan basis. I recognize that he has submitted a cursory, conclusory 6-sentence letter, not even signed by him. It's from his attorney. And I believe we have a responsibility to subpoena, at the very least, Mark Judge before we move to vote. It is our constitutional duty to do everything we can to uncover the truth after hearing yesterday that compelling testimony from Dr. Blasey Ford. And we cannot, in good conscience, vote without hearing at least from Mark Judge. I would submit, with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, that there are other witnesses essential for us to hear from. We should hear from the other sexual assault survivors who have come forward with credible and powerful stories. And that will be also, in my view, necessary. But today I am moving that we subpoena Mark Judge.
Before we vote, I will read a letter that we received from Mark Judge last night. As I stated in my attorney, Barbara Van Gelder, September 18th, 2018 letter, I did not ask to be involved in this matter, nor did anyone ask me to be involved. We've told the committee that I do want to comment when I told the committee that I do not want to comment about these events publicly. As a recovering alcoholic and a cancer survivor, I have struggled with depression and anxiety. As a result, I avoid public speaking. Brett Kavanaugh and I were friends in high school, but we have not spoken directly in several years. I do not recall the events described by Dr. Ford in her testimony before the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee today. I never saw Brett act in a manner Dr. Ford describes. I am knowingly submitting this letter under penalty of felony. Mark Mark Judge, witnessed by Barbara Van Gelder, and he has signed it.
Mr. Chairman, if I may respond.
On the motion?
Yes, on the motion. If I may respond, that letter is no substitute for an FBI interview.
The
answer is no.
Mr. Graham.
And it is no substitute for testimony before this committee.
Mr. Lee. No. Mr. Cruz. No. Mr. Sass. No. Mr. Flake. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Tillis. No. Mr. Kennedy. No. Mrs. Feinstein.
Aye.
Mr. Leahy.
Aye.
Mr. Durbin. Aye. Mr. Whitehouse.
Aye.
Ms. Klobuchar. Aye. Mr. Coons.
Aye.
Mr. Blumenthal.
Aye.
Ms. Hirono.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Ms. Harris. Aye. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, the votes are 10 yeas, 11 nays.
The motion is defeated. Now I move, as I said I was going to do, that we set the vote to report out Judge Kavanaugh's nomination at 1:30 p.m. today.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Graham.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Wait.
That's violating the rules of the committee. Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Lee. Aye. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Sass.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Flake.
The
Mr.
ram
Crapo.
job continues.
Mr. Tillis. Aye. Mr. Kennedy. Aye. Mrs. Feinstein.
No.
Mr. Leahy.
No, because it violates the customs of this committee.
Mr. Durbin.
It violates it.
No.
Mr. Durbin. Mr. Whitehouse.
No.
Ms. Klobuchar. No. Mr. Coons.
No.
Mr. Blumenthal.
No.
Ms. Hirono.
I strongly object. This is just totally ridiculous. What a railroad job. The answer is no, no, no.
Mr. Booker. Ms. Harris. Ms. Harris.
They're not answering because this is so unfair, Mr. Chairman.
Breaks our rules and customs.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the votes are 11 yeas and 8 nays.
Okay. Motion carried. I'll go to my opening statement now. We have an agenda with 10 judges who are ready to be voted on. Brett Kavanaugh nominated.
They've just taken 2 votes. It's very partisan and very ugly. Let's bring Nancy Cordes back to explain what just happened. We saw Senator Blumenthal ask for Mark Judge to come and speak, who Dr. Ford says was with Brett Kavanaugh at the time of the assault. And then there was another vote, Nancy, to explain what we just saw.
What we just saw, Gail, the first vote was the committee voting not to agree to Blumenthal's motion to bring Mark Judge before the committee to be interviewed either in a hearing or behind closed doors. That failed, 11 to 10, 11 Republicans, 10 Democrats. Then Senator Grassley, the chair of the committee, held a second vote to set the timing of the actual vote in committee to confirm Judge for 1:30 Eastern Time this afternoon. And again, you had all 11 Republicans voting yes and only 8 but out of the 10 Democrats voting no, because 2 of them, Cory Booker of New Jersey, Kamala Harris of California, were silent. And it took one of their Democratic colleagues, Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, to pipe in and say they are not saying anything because they are so stunned at how unfair this is, because obviously Democrats believe that it is impossible to move forward on this nomination without hearing from one of the key witnesses who Christine Blasey Ford says was in the room and participated the night that she was sexually assaulted. They believe that a simple 6-sentence letter from Mark Judge saying he doesn't recall this event and he doesn't recall Brett Kavanaugh acting in this way, they just don't think that that should suffice. So now the vote is set for 1:30 Eastern today, because all of these senators are going to want to have a chance to have their say before they take that vote.
And why did they change it, Nancy, from 9:30 to 1:30? We thought it was supposed to happen this morning. Did something happen?
Right. I think what happened, Gail, was that they have a full docket of things that they want to get to this morning, other votes that they need to take on less controversial matters, and they want to get all of that out of the way first before they allow these senators to go one by one. And there are 21 of them, so you can imagine that it's going to take quite a while for all of them to have their say about why or why not they are voting to confirm Judge Kavanaugh. And so they want to get through these other more minor votes first, and then give everyone a chance to speak and, for the record, say why they feel the way they do, and then they'll hold that vote.
All right, Nancy Cordes, thank you.
Nancy Cordes, we want to thank you. We want to thank Jan Crawford. And as we said, the Judiciary Committee will be back at 1:30 for a vote on Brett Kavanaugh. And we'll return with a special report when the committee votes on the Kavanaugh nomination. That's later today. Coverage will continue throughout the day on your local news on this CBS station and on our 24-hour streaming network, CBSN. There will also be a full wrap-up tonight on the CBS Evening News with Jeff Blore.
Many of you will now return to CBS This Morning. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm Gail King with Bianna Goladriga, CBS News here in New York.
For news 24 hours a day, go to CBSNews.com.